On June 12, 2025, Air India Flight 171 was supposed to go from Ahmedabad, India to Gatwick Airport in London, UK. The plane took off at 1:39 p.m., but only 30 seconds later, something went very wrong. The pilot quickly shouted "Mayday," which is what the pilots say when there is a big emergency, but before anyone could help, the radio went silent and the plane started falling. At 1:40 p.m., the airplane crashed just outside the airport. It hit a neighborhood full of homes and buildings right during lunchtime when many people were there. The crash was loud and powerful, and the plane broke into so many pieces and caused a huge fireball. The plane was carrying 242 people in total, including 230 adults, 2 babies, 10 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. The plane crashed into a 5-story building that was a hostel for young doctors and nurses, and one of the wings of the plane cut through the top floors of the hostel where many of the doctors and nurses lived. The buildings and nearby cars caught fire and smoke was everywhere, and some people were so scared that they jumped out of the windows to get away. And on the ground, at least 8 people in the building were believed to have died from the crash and the fire. But inside the plane, things were even worse. It was completely full, and there were so many people from very different countries. 169 were Indian, 53 were British, 7 were Portuguese, and 1 was Canadian. And when the fire was out and rescuers checked the area, they found out that more than 290 people had died. And that included almost everyone on the plane and people who were in the neighborhood. And it became the worst airplane crash in the last 10 years, and the first deadly crash ever for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Like, that plane started flying in 2011 and it didn't have an accident until this day. The crash even destroyed a part of a place called Meghani Nagar, which is a neighborhood in Ahmedabad. And many apartments were ruined in seconds, and families were shocked, sad, and scared. Emergency workers even came fast, but it was still very hard to deal with the big fire and the number of injured people. Fire trucks from the airport and from the city came quickly, but before they got there, local people had already started. They formed human chains to rescue people from the burning wreckage. They used water and whatever they could find to stop the flames. And now ambulances were everywhere. People saw at least 12 ambulances rushing back and forth, taking injured people to the hospitals. And hospitals in Ahmedabad asked for blood donations right away because many victims needed help fast. And the government even set up emergency phone lines and offices so that families could ask about their loved ones. And the roads near that crash were closed and flights at the airport were stopped for a while, but later that day some flights were allowed again. But people were still confused, like they were asking, how could this even happen? This was supposed to be a safe, high-tech airplane, and it was flying on a very clear day, and it was sunny, so the weather conditions were perfect. So how did it fall from the sky just seconds after takeoff? Even though people were devastated that almost everyone on the plane had died, a miracle happened. One man survived. So in the middle of the fire and broken metal and so many people who had died, rescue workers found a man who was still alive, and he was awake and he could even talk. It was like a miracle in the middle of the nightmare, and his name was Ramesh Viswashkumar. Ramesh was 40 years old and he had been sitting in seat 11A, which was just over the wing of the airplane, and it was right next to the emergency exit door, and that actually could be the reason that he survived. The part of the plane around him didn't completely break apart, and Ramesh said that about 30 seconds after takeoff, he heard a very loud noise, and suddenly the plane started falling. He said it all happened so quickly, then the plane crashed. But when Ramesh opened his eyes, everything around him was broken. But his seatbelt saved him from flying out of his seat. And he said softly from his hospital bed, when I got up there were bodies all around me. I was scared. But even though he was scared, he didn't freeze. The airplane cabin was broken open, flames were getting closer, and Ramesh was scared, so he unbuckled his seatbelt and ran through a hole in the plane. And he ran out in the middle of the fire, and his body just acted fast to keep him alive. And outside, people from the neighborhood were already helping. They were looking for anyone who survived. And that's when they saw Ramesh coming out of the wreckage, half walking and dizzy. But then they grabbed him and took him to an ambulance. And he had burns and bruises and obviously was in shock, but he was alive and he could speak. And for many people who had only seen sadness during this day, this moment brought a small glimpse of hope. But unfortunately, by the evening, officials confirmed that Ramesh was the only person from the plane who had survived. And sadly, Ramesh found out that his own brother, who had been on the same flight as him but he was sitting on a different row, was missing and believed to be dead. So even though he survived, he lost someone he loved. But people still called Ramesh the Miracle of Megani Nagar, and they named it after the neighborhood where the plane had crashed. And the police said that his seat near the emergency exit probably helped him and gave him a chance to escape quickly before the fire got worse. And some people believe that there might be 1 or 2 more people who lived for a little while after the crash, but by the next day, Ramesh was still the only confirmed survivor out of the 242 people on board. And Ramesh told reporters, "I don't know why I survived when so many people didn't. I just thank God and those who had helped me. I got a second life." And he definitely did get a second life, because surviving such an accident is a miracle. But also people wanted to know what could have caused such a horrible accident. Like, could it be the plane? Because before the flight, there was no proof that something was wrong with the plane parts. But the fact that a Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashed like this got people worried. That model was supposed to be one of the safest and newest planes, but still, some people had been warning us for years that the Dreamliner might have serious problems. And the person who's been warning us is a man named Sam Salehpour. So Sam has been working for Boeing for more than 10 years, and since 2020, he's been warning us that the Dreamliner is not being built in the right way. At first, he told his bosses at Boeing, but they ignored him, so he kept speaking up again and again for 3 years. And in January 2024, Sam finally went public. He spoke to the news and filed complaints with the US Aviation Safety Agency, which is the FAA. And then in April of 2024, Sam told his full story to the US Congress. And Sam said that there were so many things that were wrong with the Boeing airplane. For example, Sam said that Boeing was rushing to build planes faster and started to cut corners, and that Boeing was doing things in a lazy and unsafe way. And Sam said that when Boeing was building the main body of the plane, there were some tiny gaps between the parts, and these small spaces were supposed to be carefully filled with a special material called shims. But instead of doing that carefully, Boeing workers were forcing pieces together and using too much force. And Sam said that even small gaps the size of a human hair could cause dangerous cracks over time. He even said that he saw people jumping on the plane parts to make them fit. And Sam warned us that these cracks could grow bigger and bigger over time, and they might cause a huge crash in the future. And the future is here because a horrible crash happened. But thing is, the crash hasn't been linked to any Boeing problems yet, as of right now. Like, it could be anything else, like an engine failure, a bird strike, or a pilot error. Nobody knows, but investigators are still checking every possibility. And they're looking at the black box recordings, wreckage, and plane records. But because of this crash, people are now watching Boeing very closely again, because Boeing's history is horrible, and the fact that they're cutting corners to make things work and just sell as many planes as they could should not be a thing.